On this very special trip across Indiana, we remember the life and legacy of Kurt Vonnegut through my own personal journey with him right here on our little show.
And so when I saw pictures of those Iraqi kids like this, is my Hoosier response, my Shortridge response was, there are my brothers.
This trip across Indiana is made possible by viewers like you and by the Arts Council of Indianapolis.
In October 1991, something remarkable happened here in this studio. We were awed to have author and icon Kurt Vonnegut visit our little show and take the time to talk to me at great length about a number of subjects. And it's surprising how many of his reflections are still spot on after all these years. I found him to be open and friendly, truly down to earth, and surprisingly lighthearted for such a master of dark comedy. Now that we're in moments of reflection ourselves about his life, work, and career, we're going to revisit those interviews. But first, I'll look at the legacy of the man who never shrunk from controversy or honesty, and in so doing, found his voice as America's conscience. Kurt Vonnegut was born in 1922 to a family of German immigrants. And when he left his hometown of Indianapolis in 1940, he did in fact see all kinds of things, and plenty of them were ugly. After being caught by Nazis during World War II, he was forced to bury the bodies of hundreds of civilians killed in the firebombing of Dresden. He lived through his mother's suicide and his own attempt at the same. But there was also beauty. He adopted his sister's 3 orphaned children, adding joy to a lively household of 9. And then there were the novels, a lifetime of imagination, and the accompanying legion of devoted readers. And though he tried to distance himself from Indiana by geography and philosophy, those familiar with his writing know his barbs and wry observations were well-meaning, and that he held a not-so-well-hidden warmth for this, his place of birth, his respite from the edge, and his one true center.
I grew up in Indianapolis, went to Shortridge High School. I knew Kurt as kids, probably, I'm going to say, from 10 years old on. He was the cutest kid when he was young, and he was lanky, you know, and tall, and kind of loped when he walked, but he was very sweet, very courteous. He was always very well-mannered, and he always had a little sideline, a little bit of offbeat wit. It was the bombing of Dresden that destroyed Kurt. His Aunt Irma Lindener lived in Dresden, so he knew what a beautiful city it was. And we bombed it. And that really broke his heart. I think forever. So that is why he wrote Slaughterhouse 5. I asked Kurt why he wrote that book in segments, why he had flashbacks, and he said, I couldn't have written a straight book. I could not have written that story in a straight line. But Kurt had a way of laughing at tragedy, and Kurt had a lot of tragedy. But he always covered it up with something funny and with laughter. And this wonderful So It Goes. So It Goes covers a lot of territory. So It Goes means, okay, let's move on.
In this wonderful high school I went to, Shortridge, we had a daily paper. It had a daily paper so long that my parents had worked on the Shortridge Daily Echo before I had. And so a whole lot of writers came out of Shortridge. Head writer on the I Love Lucy show, a woman named Madeline Pugh. I knew her when she was a student. Dan Wakefield, my brother, novelist and journalist, came out of there. And a hell of a lot of editors and writers for you know, trade journals are down on that level, came out of Shortridge, and they could write because Shortridge had them writing all the time. That's the main thing.
So what did Shortridge do right? So many impressive people have come out of Shortridge over the years. What lesson could people learn today from the Shortridge model?
To honor the teachers as leading members of the community rather than servants like firemen or policemen. And a very high morale operation, and their salaries weren't high there at Shortridge. The Great Depression was going on, but the people were so proud, and they were so well educated themselves. And during the Depression, any steady job was a plum job.
Mm-hmm.
And so wonderfully educated people with master's degrees or doctor's degrees would consider themselves pretty lucky to be teaching in a high school.
Okay.
On our great victory in the Gulf, blowing the bejesus out of this third world country that hardly shot back, that's killing all those kids, as that's what they were. You didn't dare say a word against it because Dan Rather thought it was all right. Peter Jennings surprisingly agreed with him. CNN agreed with them. McNeil and Lehrer looked into it, and this was all pretty good. And then they took a poll, and 87% of the American people thought this was pretty good. And I mean, it was such a tragic thing. It's always tragic when you kill a whole lot of people. It's not fun, it's tragic. And, but, you know, in a restaurant, talking to somebody else about this, I had to be very careful because people around you could hear, you know. And
what is that balance between, like, the democratic principle? Well, America was behind it, so in some way it was justified, and then the vote, the wants of the minority or whatever, those few people that may have been against it are sitting there and talking very, very, very quietly. They don't want it known to the general population that they are not.
But the CBS, NBC, CNN, PBS News, McNeil Lehrer, and all that are all at one with the government. It's one big ball of wax. They always agree with the president. They won't criticize him. As they wouldn't criticize Reagan no matter what he said, no matter how absurd it was. And so you don't really need any censorship.
We're doing it ourselves.
Yeah, well, we're all getting our news from one source, and the journals who do some reporting about what's really going on, you know, about the rascals who cleaned out the savings banks or whatever. You know, I catch hell for being a bad American is criticizing the government and everything. Nobody criticizes the guys who, you know, got us to buy the damn black boomerang. What is it? It's supposedly invisible, turns out to be not invisible, billions of dollars. No, they're good Americans. The guys who cleaned out the insurance company and the savings banks, they're just businessmen. They're good Americans. The only bad Americans are people who say, hey, you know, these guys are robbing us blind.
Now, your books about war and the absurdity and stupidity of war have been embraced by a generation of youth who opposed the conflict in Vietnam. Do you feel you have the same relationship with the youth today that, let's say, you had 20 years ago?
I'm not interested in the youth. I don't write teenage fiction. I write grown-up fiction, and it is true that my books are taught in colleges and often in high school. No, but most of my mail is from people my age. As I'm not a writer, and people who try to lessen the impact of what I talk about as pacifism or whatever, or just mercifulness or compassion. That's what, well, he's just a writer for kids. Well, I'm like hell. My mail is from college professors and ministers.
Were you surprised in any way that that youth generation did embrace you so wholly?
Well, it's nothing I looked for, and very few writers can write for a particular audience. There really is a free market, and each one of us is, it has to bloom, as you know, if you're a tulip, is you damn well going to bloom as a tulip or a rose or whatever. And so then you see what the free market thinks of this, and, you know, and people, there have been a lot of people who've liked what I've written, and so here I am in business, and that's all I do now because I've sold books in that quantity. It's interesting, the guy who has been showing me around here, who's working with the Indiana Humanities Council, I guess it's called, his name is David Hoppy.
Right, we've talked with him. We've had him in here before and talked.
Well, he's worth a trip because we've been, to me, because we've been driving around talking about one thing or another, and he talked about Americans' feelings about the arts, and you know how it's come out recently is, you know, the outrage over certain exhibitions is the what the Mapplethorpe pictures.
Right.
And he said that Americans are used to seeing art in advertisements, in a beautiful picture in an ad. That's to sell you something.
Right.
And the words underneath are to sell you something. And so when they see anything written or any picture, they assume it's trying to sell something.
Trying to sell you that idea.
Yeah. And so they look at the Mapplethorpe thing and they say, this is an ad for buggery. You know? And it isn't.
And they're saying this is the way all of America should be, because we've bought into that salesmanship.
And they're not selling it to anybody. But the American, I'm not buying that, and my kids aren't going to buy it either. Nobody's trying to sell it to you. They're just trying to make you stand in relationship to this picture. It's just you and the picture, and let whatever happens between you. But it's not an ad campaign, you know.
How do you characterize the moral consciousness of America today?
Well, we used to be a merciful people. We used to be a humane people. The great generals during the Second World War, Omar Bradley, George Marshall, Dwight Eisenhower, their faces showed that war was a tragedy. And it is a tragedy. They're killing our young people. We're killing, I mean, we're killing other people's young people.
Young people.
And there was the one nut we had in that war was George Patton, who really seemed to enjoy it. But even he spoke of the courage of the German soldiers he was killing and saying they were good men, you know, and they were worthy adversaries. And now it's just fun.
You really think so? You really think that?
Well, no, CNN does.
No, I think you think that that is what is trying to be sold to America?
Well, look at how happy General Schwarzkopf is, and no tragedy on his face, no sense of tragedy. Look at tragedy. Look at Abraham Lincoln mourning all who died at Gettysburg during the Spanish-American War, which was a jingoistic war. It was America's most jingoistic. But when the cruiser Texas set the Spanish cruiser, I guess it was a cruiser too, the Vizcaya, on fire in the Battle of Santiago Bay and down in Cuba, the crew started cheering, and the skipper said, "Don't cheer, lads, the poor devils are dying." Now that's all over with. Now it's all just a hell of a lot of fun, even if you bulldoze them underground. Because, you know, they're hiding underground, and just send bulldozers over and suffocate them under there. And these are kids. And what I said last night, I spoke at the Indiana Roof there at a word-struck party, and I said I'm a Hoosier, still talk like a Hoosier, and I'm a Shortridge High School person, and I'll tell you, a purely Shortridge, purely Indianapolis, purely Hoosier reaction to our great victory in the Gulf is I saw pictures of these Iraqi kids with their hands up, you know, their heads ringing with this terrible shelling they'd taken, thirsty, hungry. Well, I was in exactly that same condition during the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans had superior technology, much better weapons, and we were just kids, and we wound up, they sent the best they had, everything they had, the best tanks, everything, unexpectedly, And so I was ragged, I was hungry, I had seen a lot of people die, and I had the hell shelled out of us, and I was just a kid. And when it was all over, there were Americans like this, as far as the eye could see, kids, dazed, disarmed. And so when I saw pictures of those Iraqi kids like this, is my Hoosier response, my Shortridge response was, there are my brothers.
When you talk about legacies, it's hard to separate the one left by Kurt Vonnegut, the author, from that of the Vonnegut family. And as our friends at the Indiana Historical Society will explain, while the author was penning his written landmarks to the delight of readers all over the world, his family was leaving signposts of its own in the place known to the Vonneguts as home.
100 years before Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s first novel was published, a different generation of Vonneguts was building the family's legacy, quite literally, in Indianapolis. In 1848, Clemens Vonnegut, Kurt's great-grandfather, immigrated from Germany, and Clemens saw opportunity in selling hardware to his compatriots. The Vonneguts even developed something that we use every day. Hardware salesman Carl Prinzler missed an appointment at Chicago's Iroquois Theater in 1903, and it saved his life. 594 people died in a fire when they could not escape through the theater's locked doors. Prinzler, along with Henry DuPont and the Vonneguts, developed the Von Duprin door, a safety feature that has saved countless lives. With the help of Clemens' sons, Franklin, Clemens Jr., and George, Vonnegut Hardware became a national leader in the business, but a fourth son chose a different path. Bernard Vonnegut saw possibility in Indianapolis' skyline, an inheritance of the family's entrepreneurial spirit, an education from MIT, and a partnership with Arthur Bond fueled a prolific period of architecture in the city and state.
One of Bernard's most famous designs was the Athenaeum. Built as a German social club in 1893, its structure was inspired by the town halls of Germany. And the interior design of the Rathskeller, believe it or not, was based on the opera Faust.
They built this beautiful German Renaissance building for a clubhouse. I mean, you cannot replace the kind of work that you have here. Kurt, being the most famous of the family, took quite an interest in it in the 90s after the building was in danger of being destroyed or taken over, but the foundation was able to save it, and he seemed pretty grateful about that.
Bernard's son, Kurt Vonnegut Sr., continued the architectural legacy with his father's partner, building structures that still exist today. The former Indiana Bell and William H. Block buildings continue to grace the city skyline. Just as his father before him, Kurt Sr.'s sons pursued passions outside of the family business. Bernard Jr. studied the science of weather and created a substance that seemed to come right out of science fiction. Actually, it inspired science fiction. The cataclysmic Ice 9 that causes the freezing of the entire planet in the novel Cat's Cradle is actually based on Bernard's discovery of silver iodide's ability to seed ice in clouds to create rainfall. Kurt Vonnegut once wrote of his brother, "We were given very different sorts of minds at birth. Bernard could never be a writer. I could never be a scientist. Different sorts of minds. Indianapolis wouldn't have been the same without them."
Actually, I'm in a spot because I'm a First Amendment absolutist. I don't think there's any way we can prevent anybody from showing anything without empowering the government to decide what should be shown and what shouldn't. And so no, the First Amendment is a tragic amendment, a sickening amendment. There's all kinds of things are said and shown that I can't stand. And yet I realize that I can't shut off the violence. I can't shut off any of that, although it's making us sick.
Now, your books have made many people laugh while at the same time reflecting on some of this sickness.
Well, I would hope so, but laughter and sobbing are physiologically the same thing. And what happens if you see something alarming, even though it's fiction, your body will respond, and it'll get you to fight or to run. And in real life, is you will face problems that can't be solved immediately, and your body will say, all right, either we're going to fight or run.
Yeah.
And so you're stuck with all this adrenaline and who knows what else. And the way you get rid of it is expel air through your lungs, carrying some of this out. You know, and you can do this either laughing or crying. But laughter is just like crying very often. It's a response to frustration. And I say I prefer laughter to tears because there's less cleaning up to do afterwards. You know, you can get on with life that much sooner and try to really deal with the problem.
Now, the way some people have dealt with these problems over the years has been through suicide, the final exit. Your mother committed suicide. I've read reports that you've had your own brush with that attempt towards that.
Well, see, there's a strong reason not to commit suicide because you leave that as a legacy to those who survive you, particularly your children, because it will seem like, I mean, particularly if a parent does it, it'll seem like one way to solve problems, and there's no question about it. It really takes care of everything, you know. Takes care of the mortgage, any bills you may owe, at
least for that one person
who's burned up at you. It really, and so you do think of, if you have been close to a suicide, particularly of a parent, whenever you have to solve a problem, you will think of suicide as, you know, as to hell with it. And I've said in one book, you know, that I hate algebra, and I think everybody does. And so if the problem is, you know, if farmer A can sow 3/4 of an acre of potatoes in 3 hours and 15 minutes, and farmer B
okay,
and everything, my answer to the problem is I'm going to blow my brains out because I don't care. But then, you know, rather than solve the problem, just to go to sleep forever is so appealing.
Is it appealing to you?
Oh, I like sleep, don't you?
I like sleep. I like waking up.
Yeah. Well, the fact that I don't. Have you ever been close to somebody who was a suicide?
A great-grandfather hung himself out in the barn.
Oh boy, that is flashy, and that is
at 80 or 90 years old.
Well, and that is famous for a way of punishing others too. There's some ways you can take yourself. Well, come on, we don't want to encourage people to do this.
No, we are not encouraging people.
Well, I mean, you're dependent on viewer support, right? And if we start telling all your viewers to kill themselves, stations are out of business.
But for someone that has been able to laugh the way you do and reflect upon some of these ills with laughter.
I laugh at the wrong time all the time. It's my response to grief, and a lot of people hate that, and they say, be serious, and I am being serious. I'm very proud of my state because it used to be a highly literate state, and I went to the greatest high school in the history of high schools and all that, and this town had lots of music, lots of books, lots of the arts, and my God, I go to find out last night that my state, Indiana, a wealthy state with a great cultural underpinning from the past, is third from the bottom on SATs. It's third from the bottom. Well, that's too late to fix. It's like the Williamsburg Bridge and like Brooklyn Bridge and like the Holland Tunnel and all that. It's too late to fix.
But still, we gotta try to fix it.
Yes, we got to try to fix it, but it's like turning around a tanker, you know. You know, it's going to take.
Which we've seen examples of here recently in history.
But it takes a long time to turn a ship like that, and right now we are third from the bottom in SATs, which indicate that we don't have a high degree of literacy. It's Arkansas and Mississippi who are below us. Can you imagine? And so, how the hell did that happen?
With all this we've been talking about, what makes you feel that life is worthwhile, and what makes you happy?
Well, I lots of things, because I'm fine, I'm prosperous, I live well, and so do my friends. And I'm a beneficiary of Indianapolis is when I came through, you know, it was a swell public school system. All I had to do was buy my notebooks and my pencils, you know, and I got this wonderful free education here. I assumed that's what kind of country I was born into, that everybody got this kind of free education. So here I am, I got a swell suit, I got a nice house, I got a good car and all that, and I'm as literate as you can be. So I'm okay. What makes me happy, as lots of things do, and there's much happiness in my life.
And so it goes. Thank you, Mr. Vonnegut, for spending your time and space on this, the third planet from an average-sized sun. Your contributions were anything but average. And our deepest sympathies at this time to family and close friends. May he live on in your most precious of memories, and of course, through his unique stories. I'm Michael Atwood. Thanks for watching.
Hogasandi spoke of heaven and hell, and all that lay between. Such music from such a woman could only be a case of schizophrenia or demonic possession. My hair stood on end as though Angelo were rolling on the floor, foaming at the mouth and babbling fluent Babylonian. When the music was done, I shrieked at Julian Castle, who was transfixed too. My God, life! Who can understand even one little minute of it? Don't try, he said. Just pretend you understand.
This special trip across Indiana was made possible by viewers like you and by the Arts Council of Indianapolis. Dance, music, theater, art. Experience it all at indyarts.org.
On our next trip across Indiana, it's vintage Kurt Vonnegut as we remember the life and legacy of the man who is America's conscience.
Laughter is just like crying very often. It's a response to frustration. And I say I prefer laughter to tears because there's less cleaning up to do afterwards.